Good evening, everyone. It is Thursday, February the 6th, 2020. It is currently 5:58 p.m. Central Time. Well, I have decided to hit the record button because I want to offer a very blunt and a very strong challenge to every single individual who is a member of a church. I want to speak directly to church members, not just members of Victory Baptist Church, the church that I'm currently sitting in, not to the members of my church alone. Yes, I'm going to speak to them as well, but I want to speak to every single person who is a member of a church anywhere. I don't care if your church is in North Carolina, Tennessee, Ohio, Nebraska, New York, Boston. I don't care if you're in another country. Wherever you go to church, if you are a member of a church, I want you to listen to me carefully. I want you to take some notes. I'm going to give you 3 passages of Scripture that I really want you to write down, and I want you to consider these passages of Scripture every single time you get ready to get in your car to go to church. You may want to consider these passages of Scripture every Saturday night before you go to church on Sunday morning. I want you to consider these passages of Scripture on Sunday afternoon before you come back to church Sunday evening. I want you to consider these Scriptures every Wednesday before you go to the Wednesday evening service. I want you to really think about them. I want you to memorize them. I want you to know them, but I want these passages of Scripture to really challenge you to consider how you conduct yourself as a member of a church. I want you to really ask yourself, what kind of church member are you? You see, one of the things that has been so shocking in my Christian life is to listen to pastors tell stories about things that have happened in their church. Church members sliding a note under the pastor's door to his office so that he would find it on Monday morning. And a church member doing this week after week after week. And every week when he would come, the pastor would come back to the church on, Monday or Tuesday, open up his door, and there would be a note that had been slid under his office door. And the notes would always be filled with, you should quit, you're worthless, you're dumb, your sermons are horrible, you should just get out of the ministry, you should quit immediately, you should just go do something else, you should retire. I've heard pastors tell stories of getting death threats sent to them by members of their church. It is crazy, the stories you hear of church splits, of schisms, of fighting, of people trying to take over the church and people trying to run a pastor out of town. And you'll hear stories of churches literally running pastors out of town, making them want to give up, making them want to quit, going after their family. The things that sometimes pastors have to put up with church members is absolutely insane. Now, to be fair, you get some messed up things that happen from people sitting in the pew, and you get messed up things that happen by the people who stand behind the pulpit, all right? No one in a church is innocent. No one in a church is perfect. We are all sinners, and we all commit wrongs, and we all do things that hurt people, and we let people down. We all do that. But I want to, for this particular episode of the Theology Central podcast, I really want to speak to church members, though. Because I think sometimes church members don't perceive how serious of an impact their actions can have on a pastor. Your actions can be the thing that leads a pastor to great discouragement, that makes them spiritually vulnerable and make them vulnerable to spiritual attack and spiritual failure, because they become so discouraged, they become so disillusioned that they feel like that they're a failure. They want to give up. And sometimes those feelings are the direct results of actions by church members. Sometimes it's just the inaction. Church members sometimes just act like the pastor's just supposed to show up and not to be impacted by attendance, not to be impacted by participation, not to be impacted by attitudes. But church pastors are very much human beings who are impacted by what people do. And I think church members really need to consider themselves. So I've got 3 passages of Scripture, and hopefully you will consider them. The first one is in the book of Hebrews. These passages of Scripture were in a Bible study guide on the minor prophets. And the reason they had these scriptures at the beginning of the Bible study guide is because the Bible study guide is designed for small groups. And so they're like, hey, here are 3 passages of Scripture that you should consider as a member of a small group. And I was like, well, forget small groups. These are 3 passages of Scripture that everyone should consider who's a member of a church. So I want to look at them. Hebrews chapter 10. Let's start in verse 23. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23. Let us, all right, here's the kind of a community idea, congregational idea. Let us, Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23, let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23, the first thing as a church member that you need to do is to hold fast to your profession of faith. Hold fast to the doctrine that your church teaches. Hold fast to the doctrinal statement, to the confession of faith. Hold fast to your faith. Churches need faithful church members who are holding fast to their beliefs, holding fast to their profession of faith. We need that. Verse 24, let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works. As a church member, are you considering those around you? What are you doing as a church member to provoke, to encourage, to push others, now listen, unto good works and unto love? Are you an influence in your church to provoke others, to push them, to move them to good works and to love? Are you do you influence others around you to be better, to do more as a Christian, to love more, to do more? Sometimes church members do very little to promote or to provoke their pastor unto good works and to love because they tend to provoke their pastor to frustration, exhaustion, wanting to give up. What are you doing to promote and to provoke others around you in church to love and to good works? Do other church members look at you and go, man, that's the person who encouraged me, who pushes me forward, who makes me better? Or that's the person who doesn't ever do anything for anyone other than themselves? That's an important verse. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24. And then verse 25. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25. Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. So let's first, hold fast your profession. Second, and this is very important, consider and provoke others. Very important as a church member. Are you more considerate of others or only yourself? Are you considering everyone around you, what you can do to help them, what you can do to encourage them, what you can do to make them better, what you can do to provoke them unto good works and to love? As a church member, are you considering others or only considering yourself? I've said this and I'll say it again. Every single time you get a phone call from someone in your church as a pastor, and it's one of those phone calls where they've got a problem, they've got a complaint, it's always about them. They want you to do something for them. They want you to change something for them. They want you to correct something for them. Rarely do they call saying, what can I do so that I can provoke others? What can I do to help others? All they care about is themselves. And if you don't give them what they want, do what they want, they will turn around and leave, and they don't care how it impacts anyone else. As a church member, how How much time do you consider others in the church? How much time do you consider your pastor? How much time do you consider how you may provoke the pastor to good works and to love? How you may provoke the others around you? And then here's a big one. The next one. Don't forsake the assembly. Don't forsake the assembly. Show up. Show up and participate. Show up to encourage others. Hold fast. Consider others and show up. Do not forsake the assembly. It is amazing how many times people miss church for every excuse. They always think they have a reason. Look, you show up unless there's absolutely a reason you cannot. Yes, if you're on vacation, if you're going out of town, obviously you can't. Obviously, if there's a tragedy occurs, obviously if there is sickness, you don't want to spread that sickness. But other than those really, work, other than serious issues that should prohibit you, you should always be present, because just your presence is an encouragement to others, and it's an encouragement to the pastor. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 23 to 25. That's the first passage. Second, Galatians chapter 6. Galatians chapter 6. And I'm not going to focus on the passage that you may think I am here in Galatians 6. I'm going to look at Galatians 6 because this is the one that was listed in the Bible study. Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. And I'm going to read that again. I closed my Bible as soon as I got ready to read it again. Galatians chapter 6. I could probably state it from memory, but I want to make sure I get it right. Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. Bear ye one another's burdens. What burdens? What burdens are you bearing that belong to other people in your church right now whenever you hear this podcast? Name the burden you're currently bearing that belongs to someone in your church. You're bearing someone else's burden. What burden are you bearing? What do you mean by bearing their burden? What are you doing? How did you take it upon yourself? Maybe you know that they're suffering and you've dedicated 30 minutes or an hour of prayer for that person, and that's going to cut into your sleep, and that's going to cut into something you need to do. But you're bearing their burden by praying for them. Maybe you're praying and fasting for them. Maybe you've taken on a burden to help them financially, help them out. Maybe you can't help them financially, but you help them to show up with whatever the problem is, or to watch their kids, or to help clean their house, or to help with something with the wrong in their house, and you hear about something's wrong in their house and you show up to fix it, or you pay to have it fixed. We are to be bearing one another's burdens. That should be the attitude of church members, is what can I do? You see, it's the whole mentality of you're not thinking about yourself. You're not being selfish. You're considering others. You're considering how you can provoke others to love and to good works. You show up to church. You don't forsake the assembly so that you can be there to encourage others. You're holding fast your profession of faith so that the church is strong. You're bearing other people's burdens. No one in a church should ever bear a burden alone. They shouldn't. Now, obviously, there's only so much a church can do, right? There's only so much you can do. You can't completely take away a person's burden completely. However, even you can be praying for them. You can do things, but we should always look for what we can do. No one should have to bear a burden alone. Now, you may not be able to take all the burden, but you can always do something. And again, it shouldn't require an announcement from the pulpit. It shouldn't require someone putting a plan together. It should require, I hear there's a problem. I can do this. I can only do so much. Let me bring this to someone else's attention, and let me grab someone else in the church. And it shouldn't have to be a plan. It shouldn't have to be an announcement. It shouldn't have to be in the bulletin. You should just be looking, and when you hear that there's a burden, you do what you can, and if you can't do it, you get others involved to help. All right, very important. And then lastly, Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Philippians 2:3. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. As you are a church member, don't do anything as a church member through strife or vainglory. Don't do anything through strife or vainglory. But you know what you constantly do? You are looking and considering others before yourself. As a Christian, as a church member, don't do anything through strife and vainglory where it's about you. No. You set aside yourself and you consider others before yourself. How many times as a church member do you put others before yourself? How many times do you put others before yourself? Listen, as a pastor, one of the things that a pastor longs for more than anything is when you spend hours preparing a message, you show up and you stand behind a pulpit, you want to see people walk through the door. You want people to show up. You want them there. When you come up with an idea, hey, we're going to study this. We're going to study this. You want people to participate. If you produce podcasts, you want people to talk about them, listen to them, to let you know. If they don't, then it becomes discouraging. I don't think church members ever consider, well, wait a minute. What can I do? I need to be thinking about how this could affect my pastor. I need to think about how this could affect other church members. Consider others before yourself. You could be in a church and the pastor's like, hey, we're going to study this study guide. I don't really feel like doing it. Okay. How about you think about how that could impact other people? That could impact the pastor in a negative way. The pastor could then give up on the program. He gives up on the program. Well, then there could be someone sitting across the pew from you who's very frustrated because they wanted the church to continue to do that devotional or do that Bible study guide. How about you think about someone else other than yourself? Church members, many cases, don't. And we all do this. This is pastors do it too. Only think about themselves. We all fall into this trap. Those three passages of Scripture, let me give them to you one more time. Hebrews 10, 23 to 25, Galatians 6, 2, and Philippians 2, 3. Hebrews 10, 23 to 25, Galatians 6, 2, Philippians 2, 3. Now let me say this. I could read those passages again. I could read those scriptures again. I could have probably found a much more clever way to present this, but I just wanted to be very open and honest, very organic and very real. Just turn on the microphone and say, here are three passages of scripture that if you're a church member, you should consider. You should memorize. These should really be greatly influential in how you handle yourself every time you come to church. And they should drive you to go to church. They should drive you to be there. They should drive you to participate. I've said it before. And those who are members of this church know I've said it so many times. When I was a church member, I made it a goal that every Monday I would call my pastor, whoever my pastor would be, and say something about the sermon, something. Hey, I like this, or this challenged me, or hey, I got a question about this, or hey, I got a question about this. Because I wanted that pastor to know that, hey, I don't know what was going on. I don't know how frustrated you were. I don't know when the Sunday was over, you may have felt like quitting and retiring. I want you to know on Monday, hey, I was listening, and I appreciate it, and I like this part, and I was challenged with, and hey, I got questions on this part. And every pastor told me the same thing. You're the only person who ever calls me to say anything about my sermons. Anything. Other than the obligatory when they get ready to walk past you. Oh, good sermon. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. No, when people, and this is just important for church members to understand, you cannot understand how encouraging it is, A, to have people show up. That's great. B, actually say something meaningful about the sermon. See if you're doing, like, you come up with an idea for the church that everyone is actually participating in, to get feedback from your sermons, to get feedback from your podcast, episodes. Those things are encouraging to pastors. And there's other church members around you. They need encouraging. They need to be lifted up. You've got to get your eyes off yourself. So many times church members are what's in it for me? Well, what about what's in it for other people? Those are very important concepts. And again, this is not just about me. I don't want to make this just about me, but obviously I can offer some illustrations and ideas as a pastor of things that have greatly, impacted me. I love when things are being taken care of and I don't even have to ask. I love that. I love when I find out, someone was sick, or someone had, people were there. They were taking care of the problem. I didn't have to tell anyone. I didn't even know about it. It was just happening. I love that. I love those kinds of things. And there's sometimes a church can be really good at those kinds of things and weak in other areas, strong in some areas, weak in other areas. Every church has its makeup, and there's weaknesses and there's strengths. But those three passages of Scripture, hold fast to your faith. Hold fast. Consider others. Provoke others to love and to good works. Don't forsake the assembly. Don't forsake the assembly. Show up. That's the least you can do. And participate. Talk about it. Bear other people's burdens. See the burden, bear the burden. All right? And then think, do nothing through strife and vainglory. Do nothing through strife and vainglory. Consider others before yourself. Consider how your absence will impact. Consider how your presence will impact. Consider how your participation will impact. Consider how you not saying anything, not engaging in any way, shape, or form, how that could impact others. Just a very important lesson I thought I would share. Yeah, who knows? Probably not the best put together podcast episode, but that's I wanted it just to be. I just wanted to be right there, very blunt, in your face challenge. Not trying to be clever, not trying to be unique, just direct. Hey, here are three passages of Scripture. Think about them, meditate on them, and make them a driving force in how you conduct yourself as a church member. All right. Thank you, and I want to thank everyone who listens, and I want to thank many of the listeners who are very encouraging, who will send emails, who will participate, who will offer feedback. Thank you for those who listen. Thanks to everyone. There's plenty of you who send encouraging emails, and thank you very much for your participation and your support. And of course, I want to thank this podcast wouldn't even be possible without the members of Victory Baptist Church, their participation and giving and supporting what we're trying to do. So lots of people to thank, but there's a challenge there for everyone as well. So please take that to heart. All right, I'll stop right there. Everyone have a great evening, whatever time you may listen. You can email me at newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com. Hopefully to send some words of encouragement and not simply to call me names and complain. All right, something to think about, and hopefully you will really meditate on this and take those three passages of Scripture to your Sunday school class, your small group, and really challenge the people in your church for the rest of 2020. Let's make those three passages of Scripture the driving force on how we conduct ourselves as church members. All right, I'll stop right there. Everyone have a great evening. God bless.